Tonight, rising COVID cases and more people in hospital than during lockdown last February. But plans for easing of restrictions next week will go ahead.
We were really understaffed for a while because everyone was just off and you can't really say anything about it. Just they tell you they've got COVID, you just have to kind of live with it.
The Scottish Government today announced plans to bolster the health service. Also making the headlines, the humanitarian effort as Ukrainians continue to flee their homeland. And did you know the first man on the moon made a flying visit to Scotland? We look back on the 50th anniversary. I'm Kellyanne Woodland in Edinburgh.
And I'm John Mackay in Glasgow. This is the STV News at 6. Good evening. Cases up, deaths up, and the number of people in hospital with COVID is now at its highest since February last year, when the country was in lockdown. But the Scottish Government says it's not considering reimposing any restrictions, and a further easing will go ahead as planned.
The Health Secretary Hamza Yousaf says a new national strategy to recruit and retain NHS staff will help rebuild the health service, but warns the process will take years due to the impact of the pandemic. Havana Holland reports.
Getting on with daily life as the daily figures begin to rise again. Statistics show almost 300,000 people in Scotland had COVID last week. But is that being felt by members of the public?
We were really understaffed for a while because everyone was just off and you can't really say anything about it. Just they tell you they've got COVID, you just have to kind of live with it.
I think people are just accepting that, not for those shielding, but for those who are kind of the same level of risk, are just saying that this is going to be a normal part of life and they're just trying to get back to normality.
I work in the hospital, so I believe that there are plenty of admissions, but it's not as severe. And people aren't suffering as much and are recovering better.
Everybody's looking forward to taking off the mask and then going back to normality, so we'll see how it goes anyway.
The removal of masks from the classroom last month remains a problem for teachers. They argue it puts them at risk, and the high number of absences among staff and pupils is causing concern.
I just feel that this is something that we well could have planned for. This is the third year in a row that we are going to see disruption to the exam system and to the education year. Yet, we are just plodding along as though everything is fine and, we'll all get through it. And no doubt we will, but I think it's going to cause chaos and a big mountain for everyone to climb later.
Over 1,600 people have been admitted to hospital with COVID, the highest it's been since February 2021, whilst we were in lockdown. A subvariant of Omicron called BA2 is driving the current rise in cases.
It's a combination of things. It's a combination of people, the population going out and about, more bigger gatherings, for example, the rugby and the football, and the infectivity of the virus and Omicron, particularly at the moment.
The Health Secretary says current figures are a concern as he launched a new national strategy to rebuild the NHS through recruitment and retaining staff.
First of all, control COVID and the transmission of COVID, that will help. But secondly, make sure we invest in the wellbeing. And the government, since I've been Health Secretary, have invested £12 million in the wellbeing of our staff. We'll continue to look to see what more we can do, but that's why nurturing and taking care of the wellbeing of our staff is a golden thread right throughout this entire workforce strategy.
But Scottish Labour say the strategy is light on detail.
It takes no account of vacancies, no account of early retirement, there's no reference to workforce stress or indeed to low pay, and it's hampered by a lack of data. And after 15 years of an SNP government, that's quite a damning indictment.
It's less than 2 weeks until Scotland's COVID legislation is scrapped. How the public learns to live with the virus may take a bit longer. Ivana Holland, STV News.
OK, well, let's delve a little deeper into this story and get the thoughts of the public health expert, Professor Linda Bald from Edinburgh University. Linda, it's now 2 years that you've been joining us in the programme, as it's 2 years since the pandemic began, and it feels almost like we're back hearing about more cases than ever.
That's right, infections are rising in the community. The ONS Infection Survey estimates above 1 in 20 people have got COVID in the last reporting period. And I think we need to remember that when we're moving around or maybe visiting people who are more vulnerable. But we are in a totally different situation, Kellyanne, as you know, from the beginning of the pandemic or even last winter. We've got effective treatments, we've got highly effective vaccines, and that link between infections and mortality, the infection-mortality ratio, has really drastically reduced. And finally, the real strain in our hospitals, we've got large numbers of admissions, over 1,600 as you've been reporting, but still the numbers of people who are in ICU needing ventilation and intensive care is low. It's around just over 20 at the moment. So we have made good progress. We need to be concerned about this rise, but we don't need to panic.
We're hearing about this new Delta Crom, which is a hybrid of Delta and Omicron. Is that something we should be concerned about?
Well, we are looking at that very carefully. Originally reported by the Institut Pasteur in France, and we know it's been picked up in Denmark and the USA and elsewhere. What happens is if you have two variants that interact in the community, in this case Delta and Omicron, they can infect the same person actually, and that's how this mutation or mutations appears to have come about. But I'm not hearing any signs from my colleagues that it will challenge our current vaccines. We are going to continue to have variants, even recombinant variants like this one. And that's why we need to keep testing, maybe not at the level that we are now, but the PCR testing in some form will need to be retained so we can pick up these variants and understand them. But I don't think from what we know now, we should be super concerned about that particular development.
Now, what about face masks? The legal requirement to wear a face covering will go soon. How sensible a move is that in light of today's figures?
Well, we've always said we need to move ahead and we need to find a way to manage this virus in the long term. And that means shifting from legal requirements, currently face coverings, and a small number of other ones still, to guidance in the longer term. I think face coverings will remain important, however, particularly when we have high levels of infection in the community. We've seen a great willingness by people across Scotland to be cautious and to follow strong guidance. So I would think even if it stops being a legal requirement, if you're on a busy bus, public transport, or as I said before, visiting someone who's more vulnerable, I really think that's a small thing that we can do to protect ourselves and protect others.
All right, Professor Bald, we appreciate your time in the programme. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
A Ukrainian mum who can't return to her Kyiv home with her 9-year-old daughter says she's overwhelmed by the generosity shown following an appeal for donations in Glasgow and Lanarkshire.
Volunteers are among the many across Scotland responding to calls for vital supplies for those fleeing Ukraine. Much of that aid will leave Scotland for Poland this week. On the border, after a very difficult week, those separated by war continue to be reunited. Here's our chief reporter, Sharon Frew.
Relieved to reach safety, hugs were soon followed by tears. These orphans from Ukraine made the journey across the border into Poland with the help of a charity set up by Hibs fans. Its chairman, Steve Carr, was there to meet them. He's now helping the young people aged between 6 and 17 settle into hotel accommodation.
It was just an amazing feeling, and it was great. It was a huge amount of relief, but we're under no illusions to say that's us. There's still a lot of work ahead.
With another 18 children and 2 staff still travelling, the hope is all will be together again by tomorrow morning. The charity is now discussing the possibility of the youngsters coming to Scotland. The orphanages were in Dnipro, one of 3 cities targeted for the first time by airstrikes. From a donation collection point in Lanarkshire, Natasha tries to call family and friends sheltering from the bombing in Kyiv. She and her daughter left last month to be with their Scottish relatives. Just 1 week later, it was clear returning home was no longer an option. 9-year-old Sophie has now enrolled in school here.
Of course she's worried, she asks every day, we are discuss about it, but I try, to keep her far away from this as possible, because it's really very hard.
Natasha and her sister-in-law are helping to coordinate the delivery of essential medical equipment, baby supplies and food. M&D Theme Park offered volunteers a marquee, and within hours of asking for donations, they were inundated.
Collectively, we've managed to pull this together, just normal people, normal jobs, so many volunteers coming in, so many people donating stuff, And Natasha, my sister-in-law, has been fundamental in communicating at the other side and what they need.
3 haulage companies have also stepped in to help with drivers and vehicles. 2 lorries will leave here on Sunday for Poland, as well as taking over supplies. They'll also have this generator, which is heading to a hospital currently out of power. In Perthshire, they are responding to a need in Warsaw. School children helped to load a lorry with 100 bunk beds, mattresses and bedding.
Everything that's in that building, every mattress there, will be in Poland next week, and it will be in a reception centre being used by displaced Ukrainian families. We're just lucky to be able to do this for them.
On Monday, more details are expected on a second visa scheme that would allow families here to open up their homes to those in need. Sharon Frew, STV News.
Well, we're joined now by Hugh Owen from the Disasters Emergency Committee Scotland. And Hugh, as we heard in Sharon's report, the aid effort continues. What has the response here been like?
Well, frankly, it's been incredible, John. We're pushing £15 million in Scotland in just over a week, in a figure 160 million across the UK. So it's been incredible, really, to be honest. I mean, it is an unprecedented crisis, and the response has been unprecedented. So, you know, before anything else, we just want to say thank you to the people of Scotland for coming out in all different kinds of ways to support this appeal.
And if the people do want to help, what do you want them to do?
Please go to the website, dec.org.uk, make a donation. You can text and you can phone. Again, you can see all those numbers on the website. So that's the way to help. But we would discourage people from collecting stuff at this point. Again, you've probably seen pictures and you've reported yourselves on the challenges of getting stuff actually to the border and into Ukraine. So the best way to help is give the money to the DEC. We will distribute it to our members like Save the Children, Oxfam and Red Cross, obviously, are intimately involved in Ukraine and in the border countries. So they know how to spend the money just now.
And what's it getting spent on?
Food, water, shelter. What's interesting, and it's probably worth referencing at this point, this appeal will provide support probably not in the next few days, not only the next few weeks, months and probably years, because what's happened to all those people fleeing the country will take years to get over. So a key thing that we will be doing, and our organisations have expertise, is things like psychological support, you know, for women and children who may have seen terrible things, may have experienced terrible things. So that kind of stuff as well is where our coalition, all those organisations have the expertise and can spend the money well in the days and weeks to come.
Hugh, thanks for joining us in STV News.
The Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross has defended his decision to withdraw his demand for Boris Johnson to resign over the Partygate saga. He says all the focus should be on the war in Ukraine, but political opponents have described him as spineless. Brandon Cook reports.
Breezing into a small corner of Aberdeenshire this morning, just over a month since sending that formal notice of no confidence in the Prime Minister. Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross defended his decision to withdraw his letter.
I'm not saying, what I said in the past didn't happen. That is still an opinion that I held at the time and I still hold. I don't think now is the time to be triggering that leadership election, to put forward that vote of no confidence, when the Prime Minister and the UK government are rightly fully focused on the war in Ukraine, supporting the people of Ukraine.
Just weeks ago, Douglas Ross led calls for Boris Johnson to step down after revelations of lockdown parties.
And now for the police to be investigating, it's not a comfortable place for the Prime Minister to be.
A saga which launched police investigations.
Potential breaches of COVID-19 regulations.
And cross-border Tory friction. His decision comes just a week before the Scottish Tory conference in Aberdeen, which Boris Johnson has been invited to.
And we are best able to support the people of Ukraine, to support them in this conflict if we are united. And that's why I'm getting behind the Prime Minister and the government. It's not ignoring what's happened in the past, it's just focusing on the real issue at the moment, which is a conflict in Ukraine.
But opponents say this latest climb down shows an embarrassing lack of backbone.
So he doesn't really believe that Boris Johnson should be Prime Minister, doesn't have the moral authority, but he doesn't think he should go. None of that makes any sense. All of us have got a responsibility right across party to come together to support Ukraine, and that's what we will do. But let's not forget, when we were facing the horror 75 years ago of the Second World War, that Chamberlain had to go. There's no reason, there's no rationale why people have to say that this Prime Minister must remain in office.
But views were mixed on the street.
So if you make a point that you are disagreeing with somebody, even though they're in power, you disagree with them, then you should stand by your word.
There's bigger things going on elsewhere than to worry about that side of things just now, I would say.
The two Tory leaders will reunite next weekend for the first time since Partygate. Ross says it won't be awkward, but both will be keen to put up a united front for the sake of party and its approach to Ukraine. Brandon Cook, STV News.
Other stories across Scotland, and civil engineering company Roadbridge has collapsed, putting more than 100 Scottish jobs at the firm's base in Bells Hill at risk. Roadbridge built an extension to the Whiteley wind farm, creating the largest one in Europe, as well as the expansion of Ocean Terminal in Greenock.
A shipyard in Turkey has been named as the preferred bidder to build 2 new ferries for Caledonian McBrain. There were no Scottish yards in the bidding process. Delivery of the vessels, which are to serve the island of Islay, is expected in 2024 and 2025. Glasgow City Council has been defending a decision to offer a £110 gift card to 80,000 people on low incomes to spend in local businesses just weeks before the polls open for the May council elections. More than £9 million has been spent in the scheme. Polly Bartlett has the story.
The cost of living is rising, and the effect is clear at one of Scotland's busiest food banks.
Family of 3, 2 adults, 1 child.
It's already hard enough, so people can afford like everything else. They're going to have to not eat and be warm.
Glasgow has more families living in poverty than anywhere else in the country. In fact, latest figures show that 1 in 3 children are living below the breadline. That's where food banks like this one come in. But more and more people are relying on their services each week.
We've been here 8 years now, and I think I'm probably more worried now than I was kind of 8 years ago. I don't really see much progress, to be honest. We need to put money in people's pockets. That's the crux of the situation, is people need money.
Glasgow City Council has introduced a new gift card for low-income families worth £110. The red on this map highlights areas of deprivation. This, the retailers the money can be used at. Scottish Labour say the council are out of touch.
This isn't about restarting the economy. This is about a cost of living crisis. So we should be putting people first, not profit. Got an election, a local council election within the next 7-8 weeks. So we often see these kind of gift. I don't think the voters will be fooled by it again.
The scale of this and the number of households that we're getting the resource out to means that there has to be a bit of a lead-in time and a bit of work done there.
So the timing was nothing to do with the election timing?
The timing was to do with when we got the money from the Scottish Government.
Poverty campaigners say that support is welcome, but the best way to help is with direct cash payments.
They're having to make extraordinary decisions about whether to put the heating on, whether to pay the bills, whether to put food on the table, or whether to get into debt just to get by from one day to another.
The vouchers aim to help families and kickstart the local economy, but they won't arrive until May. Polly Bartlett, STV News.
The weekend weather now with Sean.
The outlook for the day is calm and settled. TUI Blue Hotels sponsor STV Weather.
Well, the weekend weather's looking rather changeable and at times quite unsettled, especially on Sunday. We'll have some very strong winds in the southwest. We'll have a look at that in a second. But over the next couple of hours, rather cloudy and damp for many of us. The rain turning a wee bit more showery later on. Temperatures overnight 7 or 8 degrees Celsius because we hang on to a fair amount of cloud. Now, we'll start to see more rain pushing in across Dumfries and Galloway, Ayrshire, South Lanarkshire by the end of the night. And that spreads its way northwards during tomorrow morning. And, well, that's not a great looking map, is it? Tomorrow morning, a lot of cloud, showery outbreaks of rain. Some of it will be on the heavy side. It does look as if Jura, Isla, Coll, Tiree Also in Kintyre here, we've got the driest weather, but there will be a few scattered showers around, but certainly we'll see the drier weather compared to further east. We've got a lot more cloud and outbreaks of rain. The weather does get a lot better, though, later on the day. 7 or 8 degrees Celsius are highs during the afternoon. Now, the sunset tomorrow will be just after 6 o'clock, and there should be plenty of sunshine to end the day. And, of course, we jump forward a couple of weeks. Well, that'll be just after 7 o'clock as we gain that extra hour once we spring those clocks forward. Now, we've got low pressure coming in from the west on Sunday. That will bring us particularly windy conditions for the likes of Stranraer, Girvan, Arran, around Campbelltown, Machrihanish, Port Ellen as well. Possibility here of gusts of wind up to around 60 miles per hour, so a windy day, and again, very showery. Bye-bye.
TUI Blue Hotels. Sponsor STV Weather.
And finally, he was the first man to step on the moon, and it's said he took a little bit of tartan with him because Neil Armstrong's ancestors came from Scotland.
3 years after the historic moon landing, he returned to his ancestral home, Dumfries in Galloway. Now, 50 years on, a plaque has been unveiled to celebrate that visit. Susan Ripple reports.
We all know where this man's most famous steps were taken, but now you don't have to go to the moon to follow in them. You can come here, to the very spot Neil Armstrong stood when he visited his ancestral home in Langham 50 years ago. And Grace was there.
It was a great boost for the town. I mean, the eyes of the English-speaking world were on Langham that day, and we got a tremendous amount of free publicity, and I can't overemphasise the boost it gave to Langham's economy.
There's lots happening in the town to commemorate the visit.
1, 2, 3.
Including the unveiling of a plaque.
I was 13 years old at the time, so I wasn't at the official civic reception, but I was in the church. Because I was as a boy, I was absolutely obsessed with space travel and astronauts. And, you know, it was phenomenal.
And now locals will never forget the day the most famous moon man came to town, a place Neil Armstrong called home. Susan Ripple, STV News.
A new plaque. They must be over the moon.
Oh dear, Kelly, you don't mock an absolute legend like Neil Armstrong.
I'm only teasing, John, only teasing.
Thanks for watching. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.